Welcome to Video Game, the Movie, the Podcast. With me today is a man who is a lot like Mario. He knows his way around a pipe, and his persona is a raccoon, Mr. Trevor Ickrath.
That's right, and with me today is the pinnacle of de-evolution himself, Dillon Flynn.
Hey, how you doing today, Trevor?
Pretty good. How about you? I'm excited to be here on this new creative endeavor of ours.
I know. I feel a lot of things. A little bit of nervousness. I feel some excitement. You know what the main thing I feel is? Kind of the promise that by the end of this process, you and I will become media experts in yet another category of popular culture.
That's right. We're truly broadening the Flynncraft empire here today. You know, you and I have talked about movies on mic before, but I don't know if we've ever got really into like a real gamer space together.
Our little tentacles are getting into all the oil pots. You know, we're bleeding this planet dry of its content.
Tentacles. I'm sure we'll have no shortage of tentacles to talk about throughout our, discussions on this one.
You know what? I bet there's going to be at least a 15% chance of tentacles throughout this process. I guess we have to do the abhorrent and extremely tedious task of explaining what the show is, because this is an inaugural episode of a podcast. Is there anything worse, Trevor?
Do we? I kind of thought maybe, just in the interest of both ourselves and our listeners, we could kind of reduce the amount of admin that we would normally do on an episode like this.
I love that. First of all, I say we give them no context about ourselves. Let's skip that right away.
Who gives a shit who we are, right? We're just here. We're two gamers. We're two film buffs here to shoot the shit.
And I guess, the title kind of explains it. Is there anything else we need to say about what we're doing here? I guess I will say that this is the first one of these. This was the first movie to the one we're talking about today to have been adapted from video game as source material.
Right. We're gonna be covering all of these things throughout the course of this show, and we're gonna be going in chronological order. And what better place to start than what we're gonna be talking about today? Kind of really our main video game, I think many would say, Super Mario.
Oh, for sure. If you were going to take one video game protagonist and shoot him into space for the aliens to find him dead and cold in 1,000 years, it would be Super Mario himself.
So I guess with that, we can just kind of like get into a broader discussion of the movie. Is that what we want to do now?
Super Mario Brothers. This ain't no game.
Super Mario Bros. Released on May 28th, 1993. It earned $38.9 million internationally on a $48 million budget. So it was a flop.
It almost got there.
You have to imagine, though, they never published this stuff, I'm sure, because it lets them do all sorts of illegal Hollywood accounting. But you have to imagine that it made more than that on rental, right? This was a blockbuster mainstay, this movie.
That's probably how I saw it for the first time, renting it from Blockbuster as a 8 or 9 year old or something.
Oh yeah, me too. And I feel like you could mention this movie on the playground and people would know the references, Mario, Luigi, Mario, and I'm sure they were all getting it at Blockbuster. So
yeah,
whether or not the coffers were ever eventually filled, I don't know. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 29% critic score and a 29% user score. So for once, those erudite eggheads working for the press.
Sure, they were really repping the people.
Would you mind reading me a couple of review quotes from Rotten Tomatoes and various publications, Trevor?
Sure. We've got a quote from Stephen Garrett here of Time Out Magazine. He said that Super Mario Bros. Will baffle kids, bore adolescents, and depress adults.
How does he know? Which one is he, first of all?
Sure, yeah. Let's hear what the man on the street is saying, though. Rotten Tomatoes user Spider K said, L movie, new one better, for real.
L movie. I mean, it is kind of Luigi's movie.
That is true. Yeah, we'll probably talk about this at some point down the line. But I thought it was interesting how much screen time Luigi gets compared to Mario in this one.
And how much more of an arc he has, too. The film was directed by a husband and wife team, Annabelle Jankel and Rocky Morton, who are best known as the co-creators of Max Headroom. Kind of a cool credit.
Sure, and they also directed a lot of 80s music videos, including the video for Genius of Love by the Tom Tom Club, which is, like, if I had to pick a pop song that struck me the most as being like a Mario game,
ooh, yeah,
that one might be it, you know?
Very Mario. Yeah, I mean, like, you can kind of see all the decisions that were being made up to a certain point. One other behind the line credit I wanted to mention, just because it really blew my mind when his name showed up in the opening crawl, was the score was composed by Alan Silvestri, like probably one of the most respected film composers of all time. He gave us Back to the Future and Forrest Gump and The Avengers. He's like he's baby John Williams in a way, and here he is slumming it in the Mario movie.
That's kind of interesting because I wasn't too impressed by this movie's original score. I feel like at times it kind of just just turned into generic pizza parlor music.
Sometimes you're composing the iconic Back to the Future theme, and sometimes you're cashing a check, I guess,
You can,
right?
sleepwalk through a project, I suppose.
Let's talk about some other people who are cashing some checks.
Right, the cast. It stars Bob Hoskins as Mario.
Who I probably, the first thing I associate him with is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I don't know about you.
Yeah, that's the other big main role I can think of. But he was in a couple other kids family movies around this time, right?
Yeah, he was in Hook.
He originally was very reluctant to take this role because he didn't want to get kind of pigeonholed in that mode.
I do think he's not really necessarily seen as family movie guy. I mean, he's dead now, but I think he was more seen as like a respected British stage and film actor guy,
Oh, okay.
And then right underneath him on the call sheet, you got John Leguizamo as Luigi Mario. Now, Leguizamo has been in a lot of things. Carlito's Way, of course. I would probably look at this or that movie The Pest as the first thing that would pop into my head if I was thinking of John Leguizamo movies.
I mainly know him as The Pest, a movie that has my favorite introduction to a character of all time, my favorite opening scene of a movie.
You should Google it. If you're at home, go on YouTube.
I would insert a clip of it here, but there's just too much physical comedy going on. You really got to see it to believe it.
It would kneecap it. It would. I will also add that John Leguizamo is an abhorrent stand-up comedian. I don't think he's done it in probably 20 years, but man, oh man, he had an HBO special. One of the worst pieces of stand-up comedy that's ever existed. But I think he's a pretty good workman actor. I've liked him in most of the things I've seen him in.
And he's still kind of working to this day. I know he was recently in that movie, what was it? The Menu? He was in The Menu.
He's still doing it. He's doing fine.
I imagine he got eaten in that movie.
I never saw that movie, but I heard that it's a very sharp and funny satire, Trevor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had multiple coworkers tell me that.
Seems like a real coworker core movie to me.
Who else have we got here? Oh, the man himself, Dennis Hopper as President or King Koopa.
Dennis Hopper, come on, Easy Rider. This guy is a Hollywood legend as far as I'm concerned, going back to the auteur age. And I mean, he's a weird, eccentric, funny dude.
He definitely feels like the most star power this movie has going on, for me at least. Like, he kind of feels like he overshadows the rest of the cast here.
Yeah, and you kind of get the feeling that stunt casting Koopa is an attractive, you get there if you're a Hollywood executive thinking about how to do this, I feel like.
Stunt casting the big villain is kind of like a time-honored tradition in video game adaptations that have never really gone away. I mean, we're still seeing moves being pulled like, getting Jim Carrey in as Robotnik.
Rounding out the principals, you got Samantha Mathis as Princess Daisy. This is not a Princess Peach film, unfortunately for you Peach heads out there. And then you got Fisher Stevens and Richard Edson as Iggy and Spike Koopa, Francesca P. Roberts as Big Bertha, Fiona Shaw as Lena, Dana Kaminsky as Mario's girlfriend, Daniela, who I'm sure we'll be discussing on this episode, Gianni Russo as Anthony Scapelli, but I thought we would also take just a moment to tribute the name and the life of outsider punk country musician Mojo Nixon, who plays Toad in his human form in this film and who died just a few days ago as of this recording.
That's crazy. Kind of really recontextualizes the entire Toad performance for me.
I know, yeah. I mean, he was like one of those Austin weirdos, like, that other one who's always running for mayor, I'll never remember, Kinky Friedman, like one of those type of guys,
Sure. And, if you're looking at that list of character names here as a Mario fan and thinking, hey, I don't know who some of these people are, you're not alone, I don't think.
There's expanded canon here. And there's also, very loose, playing fast and loose with canon here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've got a few collected facts about the film. Should we discuss them?
Yeah, let's talk trivia.
So the independent production company that was responsible for this movie, Leitmotiv, was headed by Academy Award nominator Roland Jaffe and financed with money that he made from directing The Killing Field. So the Mario movie exists because of The Killing Fields, which is very strange.
That's just how things work in Hollywood sometimes.
His big pitch to Nintendo on why, a tiny little company like his should be the one to make the Mario movie instead of Paramount or whatever is that he was going to let Nintendo have more creative control. And they agreed. But then after they made the deal, for some reason, they just kind of stopped showing up. Nintendo did not really want to be involved creatively with the movie at all.
Yeah, that's kind of my favorite part of this entire story. Nintendo just kind of like standing back and being like, let's let them cook, see what they come up with,
Yeah, it is strange.
Very weird.
It speaks to a broader 90s Nintendo thing of being like much less controlling of the IP.
Do you think they regretted it?
I think so, because I mean, this thing is hard to track. You can't like just watch it on streaming.
Right, yeah.
It feels like there probably is a lever that Nintendo could pull to put this thing on Vudu or whatever, and they're pointedly not doing that.
Yeah, I mean, if there was ever going to be a time, it would probably have been when the new one came out, to allow people to draw their own comparisons. But we didn't really see any kind of push on their behalf to get it back out there in the public eye.
Here's some interesting alternate casting thoughts. Apparently, originally Danny DeVito was attached to play Mario. I feel like fan casting would probably put DeVito forward for Mario.
He was also considered to direct the movie at a certain point.
Oh, very strange. I mean, that would have been an interesting career cul-de-sac and might even have given this one a little bit more juice, but who knows? And then also Tom Hanks was supposedly going to play Luigi. I guess they felt like after he had a couple of flops like Starsky and Hutch that he was no longer a box office draw and just wasn't a big enough name to play Luigi.
Yeah, I can't really see Tom Hanks in the Luigi role, especially not the character as written for this one. I think like it kind of skews a little younger than he even was at the time.
The part of President Koopa was offered to both Michael Keaton and to Arnold Schwarzenegger. They both turned it down. Schwarzenegger, now that's an idea.
I feel like that might have been a little tough to sit through.
I don't know. I understand where the studio was thinking there.
Something that really immediately jumped out to me was that this movie was directed by a husband and wife duo director team. I don't think I've ever seen an instance of that happening before. But apparently, according to Bob Hoskins, working for them was like, quote, a fucking nightmare. And he said that their arrogance had been mistaken for talent.
I mean, yeah, not mincing words there. Dennis Hopper said pretty much the exact same thing. He said the production was a nightmare. He said the directorial team were control freaks who wouldn't talk before they made decisions.
To be fair to them, though, I also did read that this movie was like completely rewritten, like moments before production began, after everybody had already been signed on with an alternate script. I think actually Disney got the rights to this, the production or the distribution rights to this thing, and they were the ones who demanded a bunch of rewrites to make it more family friendly, which I would argue maybe should have been like, I hate to side with Disney, but maybe that should have been the goal from the start. Like,
it does seem like spiritually the decisions that were being made about adapting this Mario movie from the jump were kind of misguided. Like that they were trying to make this gritty, grim, dystopian, weird movie that like grown-ups are going to love is a strange angle to come at the property, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think there are even quotes from the cast where like they were talking about how like even after the rewrites, they were trying to like squeeze in like more reshoots that had like stuff like strippers and like dance sequences worked into them that was all going to get cut anyway.
I mean, this husband and wife team, they sound like fucking maniacs to me. John Leguizamo even said in his autobiography that he witnessed director Rocky Morton pour a cup of hot coffee over an extra's head because he didn't like their costume.
Cool. I wonder which one that was.
I mean, but also, like, did he think I guess he's just like, all of these people are ants to me and they're all here to do my bidding. But like, lest you forget, the extra did not make their costume. If anything,
yeah,
go find the costume director, pour the coffee on their head.
Yeah, it's no surprise that that both Mario brothers revealed that they were so miserable making the movie that they spent most of the production like totally hammered, which kind of reflects in both of their performances.
I think that there is a chemistry between the boys, and I'm sure hating those two directors and getting drunk on the set probably enhanced that.
Yeah, I mean, there were probably multiple parallels you can draw between two down on their luck plumbers finding themselves in a horrible alternate dinosaur dimension surrounded by fungus and two, actors just trying to make a great movie thrust into an environment like this.
Yeah, trying to make a great paycheck.
They had a lot of real life pain to draw on for their performances.
Well, apparently, Bob Hoskins broke his thumb on the set. John Leguizamo broke his leg on the set. So also like literal pain also.
Oh, man, imagine if there were people who were so deep into this movie that they were able to call out those shots where they happened. Like those Lord of the Rings fans who are incapable of restraining from saying, hey, this is the scene where Viggo Mortensen broke his foot when kicking the helmet.
Yeah, your significant other's eyes glazing over as you explain how Bob Hoskins slammed his thumb in the car door. One more little detail of like behind the lines / production trivia. I'd like to just take this quote from Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto. I'd like to have you read it to me, and then I'd like to just try to unpack it together.
Real bizarre quote. Shigeru Miyamoto said, "The one thing that I still have some regrets about is that the movie may have tried to get a little too close to what the Mario Brothers video games were. And in that sense, it became a movie that was about a video game rather than being an entertaining movie in and of itself."
What is this guy talking about?
This is the complete opposite way that I feel about this movie.
Yeah, it's like trying to run away from its property and circumvent its property, but like, here are my theories. Mistranslation is theory number one.
Yeah.
Theory number two is maybe he just remembers it different. Maybe it's been, so long that he's rewritten it in his head.
He hasn't seen it since 93.
Before we get started, I just wanted to ask you what your personal experience with 1993 Super Mario Bros. Is, what your memories are of it, what it meant to you back when you were a wee one.
Good question. I mean, what it meant to me, not much. I think I saw it like when I was a little kid who liked Mario. I think my parents rented it for me from Blockbuster or maybe Hollywood Video even. Who can remember that far back? But yeah, I like watched it once on our TV, and I was like, even back then, when you're a kid and kind of anything that is like related to things you're already interested in can kind of hit for you. I was like, I don't really like this that much for whatever reason. I don't think it really resembles Mario as I know him. It's not doing a lot to like really appeal to me specifically as a child. So I never really watched it again. There were a couple like things that stuck with me, just like something that I interpreted as weird choices, like the fact that the characters were named Mario, and Luigi Mario.
Sure.
For some reason, that's something that seems to have stuck with everybody.
Yeah.
I always remembered what the Goombas looked like, specifically the scene where they all dance in the elevator.
Dancing in the elevator, yeah.
I remember, I think my mom, who watched this movie with me, really liked it. She really liked that scene in particular, and she will to this day reference it to me just every now and then out of the blue. And that's about it. That's all I really remember, not really liking it much as a child. I didn't watch it again until preparing for this episode.
I think I must have watched this multiple times as a child. I did not own it on VHS, but for sure rented it and probably saw it also at like various sleepovers and birthday parties. I was totally aware of the conversation even then being that like, it doesn't look like Mario and it's weird and it's not like Mario. But I don't think I qualitatively assessed that I hated it. I think I was just kind of like, yeah, it's a movie you can put on. I don't think I really cared one way or the other.
Yeah, I didn't have that strong a reaction either. It was a movie you could put on, but not one that I wanted to put on again.
What was funnier to me were the things that I like you mentioned, the elevator scene, the boots, the suit up, the big moments that I did remember, and then a bunch of other stuff that I was like, boy, if you told me that I'd never seen this before, I would absolutely believe you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so before we really get into the meat of our experiences rewatching this movie for the first time as adults, I also thought it would be prudent to go back and play Super Mario Bros., the original from 1985. Is that right?
I think so. And this is going to be something that you're going to be doing for every game adaptation that we're going to be covering, right? You're going to be trying to go back and play a little bit of the original. That's pretty cool.
That's right. Not really to sort of judge the adaptation, but more to just kind of meditate on the place that the IP would have had at the culture of the time. What can you really say about a game that all of us know so well, so intimately? I decided to play through, I just kind of made a judgment call and played as much of the game as I felt would be shipped in a demo version of the game if the game was coming out today. So I played through 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4 and knocked Bowser into the lava and called it fair. One thing I definitely thought about this time a lot is that moment at the end of 1.2, Trevor, where you have to decide, are you going to go through the full path or are you going to try to go through the warp zone, you know?
Right. To get to the to get farther down in the game, really.
It's a real which way Western man moment.
Sure.
And I felt like for the pure Mario experience, I had to just go for the regular level exit. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you wanted to go in kind of almost blind, I imagine. So you wouldn't even have known about that other alternate route.
Ramona did, my daughter did perk up when I was playing the game because she recognized the music. And then she said, Mario looks ugly. The only other thing I want to share about this game before we move on here is I have a friend named Seth Milstein, a comedian, very funny guy. He told me this great story about the summer of 1986, when he got a paper route and saved up all summer to buy an Atari 2600 because his friend Jordan had one and he wanted one too. And then he bought the system. He hooked it up. He went over to his friend Jordan's house to tell him, and Jordan had bought an NES, or his parents had, and was playing Super Mario Brothers. And he said that he held the controller and he played the game and he started to weep because he realized that he'd wasted his whole summer.
He'd made the wrong choice.
Whatever, it's Super Mario Brothers. We've all played it. We know what it is. Here's the thing. We're making a podcast now about movies. There's a lot of podcasts about movies, Trevor, and
yeah,
I'm not firing any shots here, but there's something about the typical formula of a movie review podcast where they go dutifully scene by scene through the fucking movie and everybody, you know, says, oh, I like that part. I didn't like that part. Oh, here's a joke about this part. I just find that it drags to me, and I find it's hard to sit through for me. I just never wanted to make that show.
Yeah, and you know, when it comes to video game adaptations, I don't want to be making like a quality call right up front, but I feel like if there's ever a genre of movie where I don't really want to sit through just two guys hashing out what happens beat by beat, it's these things.
Yeah, I feel like if anything, you know, we should not be expecting our audience to watch these movies with us, right?
Who wants to relive the plot of, you know, the third Paul Thomas Anderson, not Paul Thomas Anderson, who is
Paul
it?
W.S. Anderson.
Paul W.S. Anderson Resident Evil movie as told by two guys talking over Skype, you know?
Misery.
Dreadful.
I would not sleep easy putting content like that out into the world. So instead, we're going to kind of take a cue from video game discussion content, and the bulk of our review is going to be done here in the form of a tier list.
Sure. Yeah. So if you were expecting like more of like a let's play version of these movie reviews, that's not what you're going to get.
Go elsewhere. So what can go into a tier? Well, it can be literally anything. Anything that you feel strongly about enough to put it in a tier. It could be a line of dialogue. It could be an entire sequence. It could be a performance. If you felt especially moved by a prop, that could go in the tier list too. We're going to alternate and fill this fucker up. And by the end of it, we'll have experienced the best and the worst of Super Mario Bros. 1993.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things about this format as we're doing it. You're not even going to have to listen to us each select something for each tier. We're just going to switch out. You know, I get one tier, you get the next, and we'll go back and forth.
And I'm sure we won't always agree on tier placement, but them's the fucking breaks.
That's the rules. You know, you're powerless if the tier falls outside of your control. You just got to watch it happen from the sidelines.
You're like stun locked while fucking Ryu throws Hadoken after Hadoken at you.
One of the worst ways to be. I think I'm going to start with our F tier in this episode.
What's going into the F tier?
I got to choose the worst thing about this movie. And I think related to how I feel so differently about Shigeru Miyamoto about this movie, in the F tier, I'm going to put this movie's complete and utter inability to bring the actual world of Super Mario to the big screen.
I mean, what a missed opportunity, right?
Is it a missed opportunity, or was it just too early for this to be able to happen? I really don't think we had the technology to like fully realize Super Mario on screen at this point in the way that like would have been satisfying to the people who are already familiar with the franchise. I think if you were to do it, you would have to go like maybe an entirely alternate route and maybe like hire like Jim Henson and get some
Right.
like real like puppetry going. But I don't know. That's just not what they chose to do. With what they did choose to do, I don't think you were ever going to be able to make anything that looked like Mario. And for the most part, this is really just Mario in name only. Like the character names are here, but an entirely new lore has been crafted. And it seems like that's really what they were trying to do anyway. I read a quote from one of the screenwriters, Parker Bennett, who said that their take on this was that Nintendo interpreted the events from their story and came up with the video game. They basically worked backwards, which I thought was like a pretty interesting way to approach it.
Yeah,
but
it's a strange workflow, isn't it? I think
Yeah.
another reason why it was never in the cards is that we've only just now kind of gotten to the point where people who grew up playing video games are filmmakers and would even like conceivably want to make a Mario movie, where these are all decisions that are being made by like boomers, maybe really late Gen Xers, and then like even older than boomers are like, hey, Mario's big. Let's hire out a bunch of people who don't give a shit about it and make a movie,
But, to the movie's credit, in defense of the movie, I do think that the original lore that they came up with and wrote the movie around is a pretty relatively solid idea for like a family action adventure film of this era. Like it slots in really nice next to like your labyrinths, even next to stuff like Batman 89, I think.
Yeah, I think also that the screenplay, it's clear that somebody took a pass at the screenplay who was like a studio guy, because there is a decent amount of setup. You got like that opening shot where he's watching a conspiracy TV show and it's talking about parallel dimensions, all these little things where they're like setting up stuff that's going to happen. Unfortunately, then the movie at some point in post-production gets like Edward Scissorhands to fucking ribbons. And so there's a lot of like little plot threads that are left hanging, and like, yeah, it's kind of a mess how it's constructed. But yeah, I mean, I do think that like the basic idea of there being this branching history between humankind and reptile kind, and that these two parallel dimensions exist side by side, it's a fun idea. It's just like, I don't know how you turn that into a Mario movie, but it's a fun idea.
Yeah. If this were like just its own original IP, it probably would go over much better. I don't know if it like would be as like well remembered, but I don't think anybody would like people wouldn't go into it with such a chip on their shoulder.
Totally. Yeah. Would be more open to the experience. I think that's right. Well, that's a strong pick for the F tier, the adaptation blues.
Yeah. I'm excited to hear what you have for our next one, the D tier.
I'm putting into the D tier the humanoid henchman characters. So I want to start with Iggy and Spike Koopa. These are cousins of President Koopa, or King Koopa.
Can I just want to make sure that I'm tracing their lineage correctly to the video games. I know Iggy is one of the Koopalings.
So Iggy, he's got the big, like, crazy hair that's sticking up.
Yeah, and he's one of the Koopalings from the game, right?
That's right. But Spike is not a Koopaling in the game. Spike is like that big, round, green frog-looking dude with blue hair.
Yeah, and I wasn't really aware that he went that far back in the Mario games. I'm more familiar with more recent iterations of Spike. But I guess, did he first show up in Mario World?
Yeah, I think that's where you first get a Spike.
Okay.
And I mean, there's, like Dinosaur Land is also a Mario World thing. So clearly they were, and Yoshi and all that stuff. They're really pulling from Mario World.
Mm-hmm.
But here, I just think that my issue with Iggy and Spike Koopa is that they are consistently not very funny. This is not a slight to the actors. I don't like looking at them. I don't like their costuming or their hairstyles. And also for some reason, and this is a problem in general with the movie, but especially with these two guys, did you notice that like tons and tons and tons of their dialogue seems to be ADR'd, like looped over, dubbed over in scenes where like the other actors sound like it's their audio from the set, but those guys get dubbed?
I think ADR played a pretty large role in finishing this movie. I know some of the screenwriters were kept on like pretty late in the process so that they could even like assist in doing that. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to learn that like, this was their dialogue was a particular area of focus in that. Like I could see them kind of finishing the movie and then being like, oh, this isn't funny. Where can we like add in some jokes? Oh, well, we've got these two comic relief characters. All right, where can we throw in some additional Spike and Iggy jokes, So that really tracks to me.
It does feel like, especially in the 90s adventure comedy genre, that like the two knucklehead goons is like a easy layup for getting some gags in. But
yeah,
I don't know. It seems like it was just whiff after whiff for them. There's like a big turn halfway through where they kind of get like smartified. They get put into a machine and turned into smart versions of their dumb characters. But it's like they do as little with that as you could possibly do. They just kind of fill their mouths with a lot of thesaurus speak. And I'm going to throw another humanoid hench person here in the D tier with Iggy and Spike, and her name is Lena.
Yeah.
Who the fuck is this lady? Is King Koopa fucking her? And also, like, her wardrobe is like so cleavage forward, and at one point she stabs Yoshi with a shiv, and she has like this whole side plot that's all to herself. And I just kept thinking, like, if you cut this movie down so much, why is there still so much of this random character in this movie?
Yeah, and someone who also has no direct lineage in the Mario games, I believe, right? This is just a totally original creation who does have like a lot to do in the film. Yeah, she does have the most satisfying death in the movie, I would say.
That's a cool practical effect when she gets like turned into stone or whatever. That's kind of neat looking. But yeah, I just kind of felt like weird about the sexual tension between her and President Koopa. That felt weird to me. And like, I just didn't understand why the third act had to have this whole, hey, this non-canon weirdo has decided that like she's the main antagonist now. I don't know. Just like, it definitely stuff that did not work for me. So therefore, Iggy, Spike, Lena, I'm putting them all in the D tier.
That feels fair. For the C tier, I want to discuss another piece of casting. I'm gonna put Bob Hoskin as Mario here.
Okay.
I think this is a really great Mario interpretation and performance. He's like a down on his luck blue collar guy who works hard at his job. And he's always looking out for his little brother. And Bob Hoskin really embodies that perfectly for me. I know that he like actually spent time working as a plumber's apprentice prior to the movie, which I think is pretty neat.
That is neat.
I'd rank this higher, but it also does kind of feel like the movie kind of shortchanges him.
Yeah, there's just not a lot for him to do.
Luigi has more of an arc, and I think that's probably, it feels like the writers like thinking that Luigi just must have been a better avenue towards like using him as a hook for the younger members of the audience, because
totally,
like this has always been an issue with Mario for me, but he just feels like kind of like a strange avatar for children to project themselves onto. This like mustachioed plumber from Brooklyn, and Bob Hoskins being like a real middle-aged balding dude doesn't make that any easier. But I think for what he gets to do, Bob Hoskin really holds it down here.
Yeah, he's got a genuinely like good-willed vibe about him, despite being kind of like a cantankerous blue collar guy. There's a
like I would really trust this guy both to fix my pipes and to deliver my kingdom from peril.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a perfect workman performance, perfect for the C tier, and you could do a lot worse in this movie than Bob Hoskins' performance as Mario.
Definitely.
For the B tier, I'm going to take a different husband and wife duo who worked on this movie, Trevor. Not the pretentious tyrant directors, but Don and Mally Finn, who were the movie's casting directors.
Okay.
Honestly, I think if the assignment here was to cast a live-action Mario movie, like let's set aside everything else that went wrong with the adaptation and the production, just focus on that task. I think these two guys did a pretty good job. I think Bob and John are good physical matches for the roles. They have chemistry together. Dennis Hopper, I feel like, was a real coup for King Koopa and locks into a real campy tone that only services the movie.
There's almost, just real quick about King Koopa, Dennis Hopper, I feel like there's almost something like Fred Willardian about his delivery.
Totally, yeah.
My Goombas! I just wanted to throw that in really quick. Feel free to continue.
He does some good scenery chewing for sure. I think Samantha Mathis is like a little bit flat as Daisy, but a good physical match for Daisy. I guess the reason why it's Daisy and not Peach is just because Luigi got the romance story, right?
Sure. Was like Peach actually like a character that existed in a Mario lore by this point, or was she still just Princess Toadstool?
I think by the time of like Mario Kart and stuff, she was Peach.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, there is some like, when does Koopa become Bowser? When does Princess Toadstool become Peach going on here?
Yeah, because no mention of Peach here, no mention of Bowser either. He's exclusively referred to as Koopa.
Yeah, totally. Don and Mally Finn, if you're wondering why they did a good job casting this movie, some of the other movies these two worked as casting directors on were Mission Impossible, Titanic, Avatar, and The Matrix. So they definitely are good at their jobs.
Yeah, and like, several other movies that feel like they could be adaptations of video games, but aren't.
Oh, yeah. The Matrix is, it might as well be like a fucking cyberpunk movie,
Yeah. All right, so next we've got the A tier. This one's mine. I'm going to throw the special effects in here. I think this movie looks like a Six Flags stunt spectacular in the best possible way. The Mushroom Kingdom set feels like really fully realized. It's almost like you can practically smell it.
Totally. Yeah.
And the Goombas have an awesome physicality to them.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like the most expensive movie ever made, but it definitely looks like a lot of effort went into it. And it really makes you yearn for an era when films had their own kind of specific like craft work about them.
Totally. There's so much good practical stuff and like some real veteran animatronic and puppetry people working here. And I agree that that's some of the best stuff in the movie.
Yeah.
It's my great honor to put something in the S tier from this movie. I also considered just like putting the puppetry and creature design here in the S tier. But to me, what belongs in the S tier is something that I loved about the movie. And if there's one thing I do love about this movie, it is Toad Goomba version. I fucking love that guy. I like his dumb little reptile head. I like his big curly mouth, and like his eyes are kind of surprisingly sad and very expressive and sort of desperate looking. I like the dumb sounds that he makes. I like how he wears his little harmonica holder that he used to have when he was Toad, who for some reason is a blues busker. I don't know why. I like when he gets really excited about making a plate of steamed vegetables for Daisy. I just think like, despite his hulking figure, he's such a lovable little guy, Goomba Toad.
I get that, and I agree with all of it. But man, a lot of the stuff you said, I had like a very much like sadder and darker reaction to, and this was kind of, I think, one of the darker elements of the movie that must have really bothered me as a kid. I can't really remember it, but this seems like something I would have a very negative reaction to. The thought that this tyrant dictator could force you into a machine that de-evolves you like both physically and intellectually until you are like a mindless follower of his. And like in Toad's specific case is particularly dark, particularly I think because they stick his little harmonica thing around his neck in like just like it seems like a very dark like act of mockery, I don't know. This really bothered me on my revisit.
Sure, but like you do get the sense that there's still a lot of interior intact in Goomba Toad, like there's still a big beating heart in there.
I know, but what's that thing from Get Out? Where do they go?
The sunken place.
It feels like he's permanently trapped in the sunken place, and that's very terrifying to me.
It is tragic. It
really recontextualized all those mindless Goombas that I've killed while playing the Mario games, where all of those are like, does this movie want me to believe that all of those guys were former inhabitants of the Mushroom Kingdom that Koopa has forced into his service?
There is a little shot there at the end of them like lining up at the machine to get turned back into themselves. So at least once Koopa is conquered, in theory, you could go back.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the whole, evolution, de-evolution thing, really one of the more unexamined elements of this movie, and probably it's best that it stays that way.
I just love his little face, though.
Yeah.
There it is. We filled up the tier list.
All right. Yeah. One cool thing about this method that we're doing is at the end of this series, once we've gone through all of the video game adaptations, we will have assembled like the ultimate tier list of video game adaptations. And we'll be able to go through the entire thing and see what the best elements of the genre are and what some of the worst were too.
So it wouldn't be a movie review podcast if we didn't at some point at the end offer up some kind of a score or a grade. And so we've examined possibilities, and what we decided to land on is the scoring system from GamePro magazine, specifically in the 90s, which is a categorized series of scores. The categories are graphics, sound, control, fun factor, and challenge. We'll explain what they mean as we get to them. In each of these categories, except for challenge, which is a little bit different, Trevor and I are each going to assign a score ranging from 1.0 being the lowest to 5.0 being the highest. There's no 0 or 0.5. And yeah, it's 0.5 increments. We can go 1.0, 1.5, 2.0, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to start off with the graphics. And this is going to cover everything from special effects, production design, costuming, cinematography, anything visual about the film we talk about here. Trevor, would you like to start us off?
Sure, yeah. So graphics, this will be no surprise since I slotted the special effects into the A tier. I'm going to give this one a 4, which on the GamePro game rating system scale is a great job.
A great job. Great job.
Yeah.
Graphics.
I didn't want to go all the way to 5 on it, but I thought a 4 is warranted.
I'm a little cooler than you. I think the puppetry and the creature design's good. I like some of the costuming. I think Big Bertha's big spiky red dress is cool. The set work is a mixed bag for me. Like, it's just so crazily off the page from the IP. You've got that weird, like, half-destroyed World Trade Center towers thing that's very strange.
Much more urban than the games.
There, in some of those sequences, it does kind of feel like the design is very sparse. There's a lot of, like, especially in that car chase, things that seem to be just shot in sound stages with like black voids, not even any kind of matte or background. Some clumsy and odd choices in the cinematography. I think some of the action is kind of shaky and a little bit hard to follow. But I do think that like that Yoshi animatronic is very impressive. The facial articulation on the Goombas is very impressive. And I do love puppetry and animatronics. So I'm going to take it up to a 3.0, but that's as high as I can go, Trevor.
I think that's totally fair.
Sound, this is going to cover all the things that you assume that it covers. I think Alan Silvestri's score here is not super memorable. He's got some kind of Danny Elfman pastiche stuff, bum, 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 bum. And it seems like what he's trying to do here is to make the movie feel a little bit less grim than the visuals would suggest. Just like the 2023 Mario movie, there's an awful lot of licensed music in here. A lot of it's pretty weird and does not really feel like it fits the movie. Like there's when they slide down the icy pipes, there's a fucking Megadeth song during that chase scene, which is so strange. But I will give it up to Walk the Dinosaur. I think the Walk the Dinosaur dance sequence feels like a great grab for a 90s Mario movie. I like how the movie arbitrarily starts with a few bars of the NES Super Mario Brothers theme. I feel like that's like pretty shameless fan service, but in a movie that's going to be denying you as much Mario as it can, it feels like a little bit of an olive branch. And we mentioned this, but there's so much ADR and there's so much dubbing. And, like some of it seems like it's there to condense the exposition. Like they'll show you an establishing shot and you'll hear Mario be like, hey, what are we doing here anyway? Oh, over here is where we got, there's a lot of that kind of shit.
Yeah.
But then there's also like technical issue dubbing going on too. I'm going to go down to a 2.0 for the sound.
2.0 sounds fair. I'll probably agree with you there. I think I would, I do not really have anything great to say about the original score, but there are some like solid needle drops, specifically during the club sequence. You get you get Walk the Dinosaur and you get some of the other ones. So that kind of holds it down for me. The ADR, not great, but I could see how it does its part to help the movie kind of move along. So yeah, I'd say a 2 sounds fair.
I guess it's a fair trade-off to not have this movie be 2 hours long, right?
Yeah. You definitely don't want to insert any more actual shots.
So next up is Control, and we're using this category as a place to kind of assess just how much the movie feels like you're watching a video game come to life, or like, to put it another way, just how video gamey is the movie. So Trevor, where are you at on that?
I'm also going to give this one a 2, which on the Game Press scales, it could be better. This doesn't really feel any more or less like a video game than any other 90s action adventure family comedy would to me. Like if you showed me like Super Mario Bros., Labyrinth, and like Never Ending Story, I'm not sure if I could tell you which one of those is supposed to be based on a video game.
Yeah.
Although you could also probably convince me that The Wizard of Oz is based on a JRPG.
I think the fact that they surf Dracula the costume reveal for an hour and 6 minutes is a real bummer.
Yeah.
And they even are like trying to have fun with the fact that they're not putting them in the costumes. Like there's that whole section in the beginning where Luigi is wearing a red hoodie and Mario's wearing a green jacket. And it's like, fuck off. Like, what are you doing?
I do kind of like the club scene where they stick Mario in that really garish yellow outfit.
Yeah, that crazy, colorful tuxedo thing that he's wearing. Yeah, it's kind of like the tone almost feels more like a low-rent Blade Runner or like a Mad Max than a video game. I do think in the third act, it gets a little bit more video gamey. We talked about that scene where they're sliding down the ice tunnels. That's pretty video gamey.
Yeah.
I think once they get the super boots and they're doing big jumps, and I even think that little showdown between Mario and Koopa at the end registers as video gamey. I'm going to go up a little bit from you, but I can't go any higher than a 2.5.
Yeah, if I were being generous, I would say that the final showdown between Mario and Koopa is almost staged in a way that really does invoke those early Bowser encounters where you're on a bridge over some lava. But that's about the most Mario video game I can see in this thing.
Yeah, there is that moment when they jump through the dimensions and it does kind of look like the Super Mario Brothers 64 painting effect, but I mean, that's just a coincidence, so.
Yeah, hey, maybe they took it from here.
Miyamoto's watching that and he's going,
Yeah, they're kind of cooking.
I will say about this movie, it's way too much like my video game, but I like what they're doing with this ripple effect. Okay, fun factor. This is just how much fun did you have watching the movie? Did you laugh? Did you stand up and cheer? Did you smile from ear to ear? Trevor, take me through the fun factor of Super Mario Brothers.
I'm kind of wavering between a 2.5 and a 3 on this one. I'm going to be generous. I'm going to give it a 3. A good job. I think you're going to have a good enough time if you're specifically in the mood for a movie like this, and if you don't mind kind of watching a bit of a throwback.
Mm-hmm.
It's even kind of like a bit of a fun movie to think about for a while after you've watched it, in my experience. But ultimately, there's nothing here that will have me wanting to return to it on a regular basis or even put it on again anytime soon.
Yeah, I can't imagine the cause I would have. Certainly my daughter, 6-year-old daughter, who walked in the room for a few times and was told that it was a Mario movie, could not have been less interested in the 5 minutes that she watched.
I definitely do think a lot of, the negative word of mouth that goes around has been blown out of proportion, though. Like, I do not think it's one of those, it's so bad, it's good movies.
Or like worst movie ever. It's definitely not in that category.
Definitely not. It's just kind of like your standard 90s family action adventure film.
So, fun factor, I think this movie has 2 pretty good gags in it. I think Mario and Luigi Mario is a little inspired bit of business, just like extrapolating from, well, if they're the Mario brothers, doesn't that mean that their last name would be Mario?
Yeah.
It's obviously it's enduring and it's a good bit of business. I actually got a good laugh at a very subtle gag, which is during the first act, which in general is pretty boring, when Luigi and Daisy are on that date. And they go down to look at her dinosaur digs, and Scapelli, the mobster's goons, try to flood the tunnels. There's a great little bit there where Daisy goes, "You can fix it, right? You're a plumber." And then Luigi goes, "I know exactly what to do." And then it hard cuts to them having walked all the way back to his apartment. So he goes, "Mario, come fix this."
That was very good. Yeah, I really enjoyed that one.
And there is like an intangible sort of fun to just kind of how bootleg and off model all of this feels, like there's like, it's weird that it exists and there's fun to be had with that. Like you're kind of more used to Nintendo today, like really obsessively controlling their IP. And then in the 90s, they were just like, oh, what? Koopa's fucking some broad named Lena? That's fine, whatever. I also kind of like the weird direction they took with the characterization of Luigi, because he's kind of like painted as a dreamer, kind of a man of faith in the mysteries of the universe. He's a little bit like fearless, and he's kind of got like a himbo energy about him, and then like
Yeah, he's a lot braver than Mario if he's not as like experienced or anything like that.
totally. And I think Leguizamo really does bring him to life. There's that moment at the end when Daisy decides she has to stay in the Mushroom Kingdom because she's a reptile and wants to get to know her dad. And Luigi realizes what's happening, and he's just like John Leguizamo's big sad eyes in that moment. You're just like, man, for as miserable as he was to be here, and for as much as they probably gave up on this movie, he really showed up to work and did his best, you know?
Do you think it is a cop out on any part that he does not have a mustache in this movie, though? Because I feel like I remember that being a slight problem for me, even as a young one.
I don't think it would have worked with the character.
Yeah, it would have made him appear a little too old, I think.
Yeah, I think so. My favorite single, like, off-model moment of I can't believe this is the Mario IP and this is an officially sanctioned Nintendo product for me is when Mario is reminded of his girlfriend, his non-canon girlfriend, the Long Island broad Daniela, and he goes, Daniela, I promised to take her to WrestleMania.
That's great. Yeah. Danielle seemed like a real New York queen too. Like all of those like Brooklyn girls that they captured. That seems like it would have been a good gang to hang out with.
I gotta say, Daniela might be above Daisy in the waifu list ranking for me. There's something about her that I find sort of magnetic.
Daisy, I thought was like very, very attractive in her like early like kind of archaeologist
Sure.
iteration.
Yeah.
But once they get to the Mushroom Kingdom, I don't know.
That I feel like it's conceivable to have an okay time watching the movie. I'm going to match your 3.0. I'm giving it a 3.0 for fun factor.
Cool. Then I guess all we have left to talk about is challenge.
Yeah, how hard was it to get through the movie? You know, how much bad stuff was there? Now, here we're not doing a number rating. We've just got beginner, intermediate, advanced, and expert. Trevor, we'll start with you. How challenging was Super Mario Bros.?
I'm going to say, I'm going to rank this one beginner. You know, it's 100 minutes. It's pretty fast paced. I'm not saying you might not check your watch during the mattress slide Megadeth sequence, but
sure,
it's by no means a struggle to get through this thing.
Yeah, I think the only time where I was really feeling the length was that there's a very long car chase in Act 2 after they escape from prison that's shot in like a really flat way with a lot of like car interiors. Really did nothing for me there. I also think the prison sequence in general is kind of like, what are we doing here? Mm-hmm. You know, my gut says that intermediate would be too high to go. So I'm gonna get right there with you in the beginner tier. It's really not that painful of an experience to watch Super Mario Bros. 1993.
Definitely a breezy enough experience for the first episode of this podcast.
Well, this leaves us with just a little bit more business for you today.
Oh, right. Yeah. This is another segment that we're going to be doing, hopefully, on each episode. Dylan, do you want to intro this since I'm going to
Sure.
be doing
I don't know what we're calling this. Maybe we'll call it, what if this wasn't a video game, but then later it was?
We could workshop that title, but workshopping is kind of what we're going to be doing here.
Yeah, the idea here is, what if Super Mario Bros., the video game, didn't exist, but this movie did? And then you are some upstart at Paramount Pictures or whatever who's been told, okay, we got a hit movie on our hands. I need you to adapt it into a video game. So now you, at Trevor Ickrath, who will be taking us through the segment, have to use this as the source material and pitch me a video game based on the original movie, Super Mario Bros.
Right, and something that I like to think I'm taking a lot of inspiration from here is just the concept of, I feel like you don't even get this much anymore in this current era of gaming, but shovelware.
Oh, man, yeah.
Back in the day when all you really had was like the Super Nintendo, the Game Boy, anything that was like any kind of IP that was a hit seemed to have an accompanying video game, whether I think you can argue it should have or not.
For sure. The Wii especially was such a dumping ground for that stuff. Meet the Deedles, whatever. It just all got shat out as a video game.
So I'm thinking about the year that this would come out, 1993. I need to come up with a video game for the Super Mario Bros. Movie. And I'm thinking about like what's going on, like what really happens in this movie. You know, who is Mario? What does he spend a lot of this movie doing? And, you know, the answer is obvious. I think, sure, this is a movie about, you know, traveling through dimensions and fighting dinosaur tyrants and helping to save a kingdom. But really, at its heart, I think this movie is a movie about plumbing. You know, Mario is a plumber. He's a guy who works with his hands. He knows his tools. There's specifically a scene in this movie where Mario is fixing pipes and he's calling out for specific wrenches and other different tools by name. Clearly a result of Bob Hoskin having apprenticed as a plumber prior to shooting the film. So I'm just seeing the Super Mario Bros. Game first and foremost as a plumbing simulator.
This was the era too. Remember Pipe Dream, where you had to fucking route the water from one side to the other by putting the little pipes in it? I mean, this is like, you could have kickstarted this into one of the big genres of the era.
I don't remember Pipe Dream, but that does sound a lot like what I'm envisioning here. You know, before you'd get new jobs. Before each job, you would choose your tool loadout. You'd have to select the right tools for the job, and you would just have to, you know, do things like fix leaks, you know, repair plumbing.
Totally.
In between the jobs, maybe you would play as Luigi driving Mario to each new job. He seems to be the guy who mans the van. And I think you would graduate from smaller jobs like, you know, fixing a toilet or something to maybe fixing some pipes at an archaeological dig to, you know, before you know it, you're repairing the toilets at Koopa Tower or something like that. I can only imagine, you know, young gamers, like if this had come out at the time, many more of them would have grown up to be actual plumbers, because I think that's just the kind of love for the craft it would have instilled in them.
It's sort of like how in the early 2000s we were trying to get all the kids into the STEMs, and now we got to get them back into the trades, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Super Mario Bros. The game coming to a fucking Video Games Plus near you.
That's right. Rent it at Blockbuster, kids.
And that takes us to the end of the inaugural episode of Video Game, the Movie, the podcast. I hope you enjoyed your time. We'll be back again next time, 1 year later, 1994, to watch Double Dragon. Well, I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm just a little bit more of a hardcore gamer and a little bit more of a cinephile now that I've gone through this movie with you, Trevor.
Yeah, I feel like we're really kind of chiseling our own space here, right next to the Siskel and Eberts of the world.
Totally.
And the whoever the big famous video game reviewers are, if those even exist. Probably not, since that's a, you know, clown version of media.
I feel like you overlay quite well onto Gene Siskel. I overlay perfectly onto Roger Ebert. I also think that you and I are respectively Luigi and Mario in this dynamic.
That does make a lot of sense to me. Yeah, I'll be interested to see how we're able to apply the classic two dudes formula to whoever I assume the protagonists of Double Dragon are going to be.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you would assume there's two of them, right?
Yeah. Maybe instead of playing the video game for this one, we should both get fucking ripped within the next week.
Ultimate hard body.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to learn how to do a real dragon punch before the next episode.
And I'm going to start taking HGH.
I have been Dillon Flynn.
I've been Trevor Ickrath.
And until next time, so long, Gay Bowser.
Great.
This has been a production of
The Lighthouse Keepers Company.
Culture illuminated.